Okay, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us on this third webinar about conformity assessment and Schema version 3 and test models for CGMES 3.0. So I think we have still some people joining, but we have already 5 minutes and it's time to start. Today, the webinar is part of the series of the webinars that we have organized about the test models and conformity assessment. The webinar will be addressed to address the feedback from the vendors and utility on conformity assessment schema version 3. I would like to inform you that today I am together with two of my colleagues, Svein Olsen from Statnet, who is also the convener of CGMES subgroup, and Chavdar Ivanov from GridDigit, and together we will continue to explain to you more details on the different subjects here and different subtitles under this presentation. For your information, the presentation will be recorded, and it started and ready to be recorded. In the agenda today, we have the following topics that you can see on the screen. So we will have a 10 minutes introduction part, then where you will be informed about different information about the material and submission and other things. Then we will have conformity assessment schema version 3 for around 15 minutes. The following section, we will discuss about test configurations, status, further update and next steps for around 20 minutes. Then we will have some moderated discussion focused on the received feedback for around 30 minutes. And finally, we would like to have some minutes dedicated for questions and answers, so around 15 minutes or more. So as I have explained, the webinar will be recorded and publicly available. So it means that as we did the practice in other webinars, you will have the recorded webinar after the call together with other materials. So during the discussion, I would like to emphasize that it's better if you can mute yourself in order to ensure sound quality. And in case of questions and comments that you have, you can submit them on the chat window or raise your hand, and then I will try to collect them and to bring to the discussion and discuss all together. So the aim of the webinar, as I have mentioned, is to ensure that participants have necessary information about the latest updates in the conformity assessment schema version 3 and test models for CGMES 3, as well as code components. The other aim, important as well, is to help ENTSO-E efforts to prepare impact analysis and implementation plan, but at the same time to help vendors and utilities to have necessary information to plan their resources. So the webinar, just for a short information for previous webinars, because we have had a lot of communication exchange with many of the vendors about CGMES 3.0 in general. So in 2020, we had a series of webinars organized for CGMES 3.0, and I would like to shortly just remind you that we have that information still available on CMUG website, where you can access a lot of documentations regarding CGMES 3.0. And also we could record the second webinar where we have had a more discussion about the CGMES kind of deep dive and some details on the CGMES conformity assessment schema on that time. So these webinars and this material is already present under the links that I have that I'm showing to you here. And when you get this presentation, you can also use these links to access that material in order, if you would like to have some more information about the CGMES 3 that we presented in that time. For the webinars that we are organizing regarding conformity assessment and test models, as you are all informed, we have had the first webinar on the 22nd of February. On that webinar, we provided general information on the changes made to CGMES 3.0, conformity assessment schema and test configurations. That was the starting point, and you have already received the recorded webinar on the which is also part of a kind of YouTube channel, which is part of ENTSO-E, and I believe that everyone could access that. On 15th of March, we have addressed the feedback collected from the vendors. So many of you that have provided the feedback, we have selected that, and we have provided also our comments and our opinion on many of your documents. We replied directly to you with our opinions and arguments. And also the webinar organized on this date is available, and you have already received that by email. So today's webinar is the third one in this series that I have already mentioned. And the focus, as I said, is to inform about the latest updates in the conformity assessment schema and test models for CGMES 3.0. You will have, after the webinar, you will receive the material, this presentation, you will receive also the recorded webinar. And also I would like to mention here, of course in the end, that you can feel free to write back to us for anything that is related to this topic, for any clarity or comments that you might have. Now, as I have mentioned, I am with two of my colleagues who will continue to present other parts of the presentation and the webinar. And I believe that it's time now to continue with the other topic in this presentation, which is conformity assessment schema version 3.0. And I think for this chapter we will have Svein Olsen to present more information and more details of this chapter. If you have some comments regarding this agenda that I have presented, or all the information material that I have presented in this chapter, please write it here in the chat, or just raise your hand and we can have the discussion. And if not, we can continue with the presentation from Svein.
Thank you, Arsim, for a good introduction. First, I would like to apologize to the US people that has been logged in, and the US people that didn't log in because of the Memorial Day. Sorry for that. It's not always that easy to have full overview of different holidays, and particularly in May. Hopefully we might be able to end this early. However, if not, we will have a significant amount of time for taking up questions from the audience. First, I would like to kind of start with just doing a very quick recap of the conformity assessment schemes and the status of the CGMS standard. The key thing to acknowledge that this is primarily a bug fix standard, not introducing that much new functionality. However, some of them are significant, but we are really hoping that is helping to create clarity. And that has kind of been the whole goal of gathering all issues that was being reported on the 2.4 and through the experience of using the standard. And we also now consolidated it with all the 400 series of standard, even though not all of them are yet available for download, but they are in the process. All of them are in the process now. But one of the things is that we're making the CGMS an international standard and not any longer a technical specification. That is very significant for Europe because technical specification is not part of the CENELEC standards. And CENELEC is the European standardization body that has the responsibility of providing the standards for the European network code. But we have really tried our effort to not make this kind of specific for Europe. We try to make this so it can be used international as the spirit of the Frankfurt Agreement between Stenelect and IC to make sure that we are not creating different standards in the different regions. And then also so that, you know, utility can have kind of one test and apply that all over the world. And that leads up to the whole idea of conformity standards. And so this is driven by the business, but also some of the technical need. And with a very focus on getting quality in the data exchange. And this is particularly important now that more and more process that it has high expectation of quality. So we're now moving away from the 10 years network development planning that is basically doing a merge every 2 years to multiple merge on a daily basis. Using the CGMS. So what we need is to make sure that we have the tool supporting the standards so that we can decide to move over to use the updated standard. I will also come into some of the other specification that ENTSO-E is working on that in principle supports both the 2.4 and the 3, but where the 3 gives the best support. So the whole CGMS 3.0 has a long history, or a relative long, back to 2014 is when 2.4.15. Already at that stage, we knew that there was stuff missing. However, the network codes wasn't yet published, so we kind of had to guess what the network could be. So that was kind of the development. We had an IOP in 2016, where a lot of the functionality that we now have in 3.0 was tested and discussed with all the vendors that participate. In 2018, we created up the roadmap that it's been approved by ENTSO-E and gives the outline. CGMS 3.0 is then answering some of this question. We are planning to create an update to this roadmap so that we see what has been now resolved and what is left. And some of the new stuff has also arrived that we need to put into the roadmap. In December 2014, we had the CDV out. We had in February 2020 our first set of webinar, as RCM explained, where we talked about what will be in the CDV. We encourage everybody to give feedback on that, and the commenting ended up in end of April last year. From that, we spent quite a significant amount of time to kind of resolve the feedback and align everything with the standards. And in October last year, we submitted the FDIS with all this data. And in beginning of December, we're starting to have our first beta versions of tools that support the CGMS and building up the conformity assessment. And as the webinar we had in February, and in parallel, we now published the FDIS, and they are all being approved, and they are now in the set of being published. The IC timeline actually said that they should be published on Friday, on 28th, but I couldn't see it in the shop this morning, so I think we may have to have a little bit patient, but I assume that they will be available during June. So what we are outlining that we have the stock approval of the conformity assessment schemes, then we will publish all of this information, and that will also include a link to the to standard that can be purchased. So we will update the library, and also we are planning to then have the code components, the schemas or the FS schemas that can be downloaded, the CAS conformity registration, and that also includes all the forms and also the updated configuration and all the registration form. The idea is that the CAS 3.0 will be available in parallels with it too. We need to see how long this duration, but of course we are encourage people to go over to the 3.0. But there's nothing saying that you have a new version that you will make the conformity assessment with both standards. Well, we are a little bit unsure if it's any need to have any additional webinar when the conformity assessment for the 3.0 is open for registration. Our goal is that this will resolve any kind of issue, any questions, and also that we are providing website and information that should be sufficient. But if any of you thinks that it would be good to have something like that, then please report back, and we can then consider that. I would also emphasize that there have been some updates on this the site. So if you go on the library site, CGMS, same CGMS library, you will find that there are an updated document here talking about the CGMS profiling user guide. And that explains how we are using the SIMCON textures to create the profiles. You also have the link to all the IC standards. And we also publish kind of a little bit roadmap for what we are considering being additional stuff for the metadata and the header of it, of the files. This is a little bit to complement what's going on in the building process, that the document dealing with the quality CGMS dataset document, and also the implementation guides. They are also available here to be downloaded. And also we have done some specification in regards to coordinated security analysis. This is in principle compliant with both 2.4 and 3. However, 3 will give a richer vocabulary, and it is slightly based on having the support for the in-service flag. We also added the document for the 10 years network development, and we have here the roadmap that I talked about, and we will upload as soon as we have the kind of assessment document here to see what's being solved in the 3.0. So this, as I said, will be updated with the linkage and the data for the 3.0. In addition, we will also, the site for the conformity assessment, we will also update here to have the download of all the stuff for the CGMS conformity schema 3.0. So that is kind of our plans, and then showing it up in sending it out to everybody when it's all ready. Important here, it may not be extremely clear stated in the framework, but our expectation is that all vendors are doing a self-assessment for every new release of the application based on the latest schema version. So if we make any update to the schema, we will try to notify as early as possible that we are planning to make an update, what has been updated, and to some extent we will understand some kind of grace period. But in general, what we're trying is to solve any issues. So bug fixes are fixed as quick as possible. So keep an eye on the site. And basically we are expecting the self-assessment for any new releases. The second party assessment is our recommendation that it should be done for all major releases, and in any releases where the CGMES functionality is being updated. The idea here is that the support for the CAS is a continuous process, where we kind of have a CAS version published, new version of application is initialized, the vendor performs the relevant test use cases and submit a declaration of conformity, and also register for assessment. And as I said, you can also have just a registration of the conformity, but any major releases should be assessed, second-hand assessed. Then it goes to the assessment body, and we are now looking at using third assigned lab assessment. We'll publish more information about that when that is totally clear. But we have the schema is now updated to leave that possible. And then it will go into the assessment body, the opinion body. So assessment body will present the report, and opinion body is making the attestation of conformity when the conditions are met. And then this is a continuous process. And similar process are we interesting to build up for the site acceptance test. But of course, in this way, we are more in line with testing the support of the TSO's data. So in the factory acceptance, we have fixed data set, and we are testing the functionality. And in the site, we have the functionality tested, and now making sure it can deal with real data, and that the data is also conforming to the standard. As we now publish, we were making all the latest update based on the feedback we got. And when this has been approved, we put it on the website. And from that on, the change request procedure. So you can always send an email to CGMS conformity and then request any kind of change procedure. That could include, of course, bug fixes, but also if new types of tests should be added, we'll then put that on the backlog. And this goes with both the utility and the vendors. There will be a dialogue with the assessment body to see the impact of this, and a dialogue and the assessment on the schema owners. And if this goes through, you will be notified if this been accepted and updated, and then will be coming up in a update, a new version. It's very important for us that we have both the vendors and the utility has trust in that the test data and the schema is sufficient. I mean, we all know it needs to be better, but so we have a continuous improvement process, but at least it needs to serve its purpose. And the purpose is for a utility to understand the type of functionality that is supported by the tools, and also for the tool vendors to understand clearly what is expected from the different types of conformer. And for that, we hope that we're reducing cost and reducing time to market. And if that's not the case, we are totally missing the mark. So we are all that that is, our aim, and whatever we do is to be able to reduce the time to market and improve its quality. Code components, we publish those. We haven't got any update yet on these, but we do expect to have some updates on the 501 edition too, and also regarding Shackle. We didn't get kind of feedbacks regarding the need for the backwards compatibility, so we're trying to move forward. So we will not publish this. We will publish the CGMES 3, the version 2020. And if for people that don't remember exactly what the difference, this is we're using kind of ontology namespaces to deal with versioning of the schemas. We also expect that there will be some updates in the 501. We have found one minor or one bug, and we are in the process of having people in the W3C community validating it, so that we know that this is not made just for our community, but it can be working on tools that is standard semantic web tools. There will also be some updates to the shackle constraint, but this will be the preferred constraints description forward. Right now, we include the OCL for backwards compatibility in the previous, but this will be phased out and supported by shackle. We need to see about, that's also where we want to have feedback, if we need to have some kind of conversion from shackle to OCL, that we believe that is possible. We think it's harder for going from OCL to shackle. And shackle is more implementation independent. OCL is close to implementation, so for some vendor it might have a very good fit, for others may have not so good fit. So that's the direction we're going on the code component. I would say there is dialogue how to make them available on the IC and also on the SIM user group, but there is no totally resolution, but we will publish them on the ENTSO-E side. Okay, then we did get some questions and some feedback in regards to the conformity category, and we found them slightly difficult to understand, or more saying a room for improvement. However, it's not that easy to find a scheme that fits all different types of tools. So yeah, most of the tools has been analytic tools that a lot of vendor has kind of stressed, because I need to add a lot of overhead for, I don't really need it for my processing. And what we are trying to say here, that no one single tool needs to support all of the functionality. You can have different tools that can support different levels, and we are moving in the direction to have conformity for model management type of tools, and then analytic tools, and then parsers, So we don't necessarily want to have like a conformity for one defined tool that can do everything. But of course, the dialogue with the utility needs to be in a way that you are, that the vendor is able to communicate what their support is. So one of the things is we took away the standard category. The reason for this standard category was to encourage utility vendors to support multiple, not so that I just went in, did one conformity, one functionality, and say, yeah, I'm SIM compliant or CGMS compliance. In the beginning, when the utility wasn't that aware of this, that could probably be a case. Now we're doing a significant job to inform utility as well that this matrix is really meant for them in the procurement process, and also their assessment for which tool to use. So we kind of taken that away. So there are no top level conformity. And then we are looking at the different types of information. However, for the import export feature, it was a bit complicated. So what we've done now is set up a scheme we have inclusive, individual, and difference, and then an overall function for each of the profile in regards to import and export. So I will come back to what these different things are. What is imply here that in general, if you have support, if you have functionality, but you may not be compliant totally, the thing is to use the default not assessed, the NE. Then if you don't have support and you want to inform that, you can put no. And that's particularly also indicating that the tool is not intended to do this type of job. And then, of course, you can tag it as yes. So you have this for each of the profile here. And then, as you can see, some of them is not applicable, where we're saying that in general, the SIM standard is not kind of endorsing having difference model for these profiles. Then you have the function for the other one, where we haven't made any. We made some changes that I will tell you later, but in general you have this. So this is the kind of the overall template for doing the self-assessment, to make the statement for what the tool support. If we then dig in what inclusive, individual, and difference, and we made quite a lot of discussion to get that clear, and we're trying to not saying that there's only one way that you can do the CGMS compliance. We think that different utility may have different need, and there is not that we want to encourage different way of solving things, but what we need is to having a common understanding what is supported and what's not supported. So this inclusive is the idea that there are some tools out there, and they could be particularly converters that have a problem handling each individual profile without also processing any dependent profile. And there's nothing wrong with having that dependency. It's just that you can then you're stating that it's inclusive, that you do need to have the dependence model also process. For tools that do support individual on this, they can also say that they have inclusive in their body. They can also say that, hey, I can also do the processing of having multiple profiles put together and exchange at the same time. So like as we have the CGM process, which is also different from the 10 years network process. So where you have different needs, and then we were trying to outline this and also outline it for the business process so they can pick what they are needing to support the business process. So the individual is basically stating that you can then treat each profile profile independent and exchanging them. I mean, totally independent is of course not the case, because you need to have the link of the dependency, but the general principle is that you can then deal with each individual profile without the dependency. And the third level is the difference, where you, and that is expected that it need to be handled on individual operation, where you have the different file for each of the profiles that is applicable. So we hope with this that it makes it clearer, even though it might not be so easily to understand what's written there. But that is a little bit the intention here, is to, in principle, create flexibility and not, exclude a good tool or exclude a good way of processing just to be conform. On the functional categories, so a little bit on the, as I said, the general concept of the import has been updated. On the top level, we still have the gold, which will be the full support of the functional category. That means it has to pass all the test use cases defined for that functionality. And a silver means that you have to support all silver and bronze. And a bronze is, so that's, silver is in general considered that, a reasonable support. Arsim, can you mute so if there's no question there? It was far in the background. So bronze is kind of the limited, so the minimum support, and then you need to pass all of the element. For the import, if I go back, so in case here, so then you have to set up the category for the import and export. So you can having an overall assessment for it. And that is, if for gold you support all three of them, inclusive in the individual and difference. Of course, there are some profile that is not having the difference, but you get the gold rate if you then only have the two of them. Silver means that you have support of the two. There are no silver grade for when the TPS is SSS and SV, the single, the non-difference profile. And bronze is that you have only one of the support. We have then made updated this, but in general it's very much in line. We have the sign here for the import export. That's why we have indicated inclusive or individual and difference, where these things are tested. And the same, for import export, and we have some in the regards to repository. So in regards to how to deal with the merge and solve cases. And we also have kind of a minimum requirement profile and then the relevant profile. So giving you, as good handwise as possible, and also giving you here a matrix on the different use cases for the inclusive, individual, and the difference. And here highlighting that not all function has bronze. So some function has just straight to gold, and then only silver for as the alternative and non bronze. Yeah. Have I left anything out there, Chavdar, that I should mention?
No, I think it's okay. So there is another 2 lines on the top, which are also minimum requirement there on the functions. So for example, if you get to update a repository, you need to be silver on the import and export and so on.
Yeah.
So that's also.
Yeah, that is important to notice. Yep, good. And so anybody is free to have a question that we can go through in the questionnaire. We also spend quite a bit of time dealing with the tolerance topic. As this profile doesn't really have the power flow settings that we are planning to build in, a little bit outline the direction we're going is in that header document that I referred to. But we, as also stated in the previous webinar, we are moving in the right direction to have the conformity in principle machine testable, and back to also helping those of you that do automated testing. So the whole idea that you can then continuous integration with continuous testing, and then you can do continuous testing against the conformity. Again, the whole idea that we building in the quality from day one, and helping you, all the vendors, to build quality in an efficient way. So we need to kind of have we can have too many kind of objective, the subjective type of evaluation. We need to have kind of clear and concise values. So we kind of ended up with 1% tolerance. And again, if some of this doesn't make sense, give us feedback. The reason we ended up is that the models are very small and kind of known. Maybe not too, because I don't want to have anybody hard coded in, doing a Volkswagen type of test. Oh, now we know that we have this test model, so now these are the results. So I rather having feedback, and then we make changes if it doesn't make sense. But all the power flow settings are now defined in the text of in test use case. So of course that makes the expectation clear. And again, what we are trying to do in the future is actually include that in the test configuration and also in the test in the standard itself. We also have disabled the controls, because what we see that if you have different order of the controls, different logic in here, it's very likely that you can get quite say different result. But we will, getting this becomes even more problematic when we are looking at big models, and we want to have test conformity for the site acceptance as well. So that, any feedback that you can give to make sure that we are going in the right direction to make this better, we're happy to take. Then I will leave over to Chavda. Do you want me to have the presentation open here, and then?
Yeah, it's just one slide. I think we can go through that. Yep. And then I will show. So you can go to the next one. Yeah, so you most probably remember from the last time, or if not, you can watch the recording. So there were a few actions to be done on the test configurations. So some were missing, like the one for the PSTs and for testing the power flow. In addition, there was some of the bus bars configurations that were not included. So what we have done in April, beginning of May, was to add these missing components to the test configuration, and that was published and revalidated with the available at that time version of SimDesk. We still have to include the difference models for microgrid. So the agreement there was that we are not going to have too many different files for different test configurations. So we will only have one set for microgrid, going from the base case to type 1, just to have some demonstrations on that. And then we have exported the power flow results for all these test configurations, and I will show you how it looks like in the package. We do see now as a next step that what is not included in the documentation of the test configuration is the count of the classes. So the idea was to add it to the Excel file with the SIMDesk validations. So I will take now the screen and I will walk you through the package, and we will going to discuss a few more things. So yeah, so you see the screen, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so the package that you received on 10 of May looks like this. So there are subfolders here containing different test configurations. And I will quickly go through the things and tell you where we expect to touch a few things. So on the full grid, so we have the validation report. And inside that full grid, we have only the following profiles. So we have the equipment related and SSH, TP, and SV. We don't have the GL, and we don't have the dynamics layout, the dynamics profile, and the geographical layout location. So for these profiles, the agreement is that for testing of a geographical location and the diagram layout, we will use the available files in the microgrid. And for the dynamics, there, as we said last time, I think the tests are not really focused on the complete dynamic model, because there are too many classes there, and anyway, in order to be able to test a proper response, different kind of testing is expected. So again, for this, we ended up with a smaller example in the microgrid. So that's on the full grid. Then going to, yeah, and the full grid also is not used for power flow. So there's no, the results could be whatever there inside. So for the microgrid, we have these different folders here. So the base case is one thing, and then we have 3 types. The dynamics is also put here separately. So this adds on top of the base case. So let's go and see the base case now. So here you see the merged test configuration, which includes the 3 model authorities as the Belgium, Netherlands, and the boundary. And here in the Excel file, we have the results, and that's similar to other, where there is 2 tabs for the results from the nodes and the power flow on different elements included in the model. So this can be used when in the review sessions, or for you when implementing to to compare. And of course, if you find issues or you have any suspicion here and there, so please don't hesitate to contact ENTSO-E or the assessment lab. Something what we have here in addition for microgrid is the diagram which contains the load flow results as well. So we can just zoom and see. Hopefully the same results are shown in the Excel. So before, in the previous conformity in the CAS2, we had one document per each test configuration, which was including the validation results, these diagrams, some descriptions around the file names and what is where. But we want to simplify this a bit to the extent we can. So now the documentation will be basically including this Excel with the results, the diagram here, and in the SimTest validation report next to the outcome, which all these are considered okay for that given test configuration. We will add additional tabs with the count. And just before the webinar, I did one example how this is going to look like, and I'm going to show you. So just you get an idea what setup we are talking about. So here, for example, next to these 3 tabs, we will have microgrid base count, and we have the classes and their count, and the same for type 1 and type 2. So this is still to be generated for the package to be published on the website. So this, yeah.
And so one of the reasons, again, if using the CSV or Excel file, it is a little bit easier to do machine validation afterwards than in the Word document. So that's also one of the reasons we're moving away from the Word document.
Yeah. So we go to the next one, the mini grid. As most of you know, this is dedicated for looking at the short circuit, the IEC 6909 standard. So that this configuration comes actually from there. And in exactly the same style, we have the results and the validation report. This power flow case is a very small model, and for that one we actually have a bit more documentation. That was done at the time. There were a lot of discussions on how the tools are calculating, and in this document you see what is the model, and there is all the equations and data used to solve the load flow for 2 different configurations here, with a line or without a line, and all that is described here in a very mathematical way, and we have the concrete numbers. So there is here, yeah, and the classes that the sim classes that relates to the equations mentioned above. So what we have here is the explicit load flow calculation, and in that table you can actually change. So these equations are embedded here, as you see, and you can change the load, and then normally you should get that result on that node there. or you can change tabs as well. There is that transformer have like 15 or 16 tabs, and so some more detailed checking can be done to see if the tool can manage. So I guess that won't be problem for most of the tool, but it's good to have this small system in case of we try to find some particular problem. And then for PST, there are 3 different test configurations here. 2 are with the phase tab changer linear, and 1 we have the phase tab changer table. So they're also very small models and include the power flow results and the validation reports. Same here. So RioGrid, that's very similar to what you know from the Conformity version 2. So it's originates from a very old model. It's close to RioGrid, and it's only one model authority set. So here we have only the 4. Make it only the 4 profiles, and there is no boundary involved in that. Then we have the small grid, and that originates from the IEEE 121 model, I think, and this has also results, and what was traditionally done for that normally should have a very good geographical layout and diagram. So on that should be the cleanest, but hopefully others also have good details on this. Now, something as we discussed already in the previous webinar, so we introduced this Svedala model, which was provided to ENTSO-E for the purpose of this conformity. It's a node breaker model with around 1,000 connectivity nodes, and this one, it's good to look at the details on the node breaker modeling. We do have, so there were some feedback we received on that the diagrams are missing some connectivity nodes. So this is something that we will try to investigate now before the publications, and if there's something missing, we can update it. And in general, as you know, making this test data as clean as possible, it's a very iterative process. So it's not excluded at all that when the conformity starts, some issues will be found, and then we need to follow the update procedure and make necessary updates and inform people and so on. So this is on Svedala. Yeah, I think this is more or less the package we have. So what we expect to do now is to add the counting of the classes. There might be a need to regenerate the validation reports, because also there has been some fixes on the validation tool side, but these are more slight updates on the documentation rather than touching the test configurations. And if we've realized that there is this issue in the Svedala model, so we will also try to fix that as well. So do you have any questions to the data or to all the things that Sven was also introducing?
I can have just 2 slides here,
Yeah.
and then people can start thinking about questions. So we didn't get that much feedback from this one. So we had some feedback. We will report back to those, and we try to address those through the meeting here. Not specifically open them, but we kind of address the question we got, so everybody kind of understand why we're doing this different things, and then we're trying to address it. And as Chavda pointed out, there will be some fixes in Svedala, and of course there's not like, yeah, we had the end, because last week we have the gate for providing anything that we could take up in this meeting, but continue to send any feedback. But of course, the process of making updates becomes harder and harder and longer as we move along. So
There's
now
a question, I think.
Yeah,
Yep.
we have Emil with raising the hand.
Yeah, hello everyone. I would like to get back to the conformity assessment procedure. So you mentioned that this is an iterative process. So how do you imagine the whole process? So I have a question particularly regarding to the updates of the CAS. You mentioned that all the tools that already applied and maybe received the conformity for a particular CAS version might need to redo the some test cases or maybe all the test cases in case the CAS is updated. So how do you imagine this whole process? I mean, what is the dynamics?
So I would say for all tools, so the one that has conformity to 2 or 2 the schema 2 or earlier 1, they all need to redo things with the 3.0. So as soon as you, and again, it doesn't mean that you have to have all the cases. That's something that you need to make a statement. But in general, I would like to have everybody have a second-hand opinion before they kind of publishing the self-assessment. So you should always have a self-assessment. And if you are saying that I would like to increase so I can do these and these test cases before I do the second-hand, that makes sense. But it also, by having the people second-hand assessment, it also gives us a clearer understanding from where we are. And then, so we do expect everybody to go to the 3.0. We will be then, so if we then update the schema, we do expect you to look at the updated when you do the self-assessment. So if you do a minor release and you don't do anything on the CGMES profile, then I think it's good enough to just push the self-assessment. So it's stating that everything that worked before works on this one as well. And if we have some kind of bug fix or minor changes to the schema, it will be always good to refer to the latest schema, so that it is included any of these bug fixes. And then if you do changes to the CGMS, particularly if you add some new functionality, or if you retire some, I'm not necessarily saying that you should do a second-hand assessment, but particularly if you do some additional functionality, even in a minor release, then you should do a reassessment. I mean, I don't see, and I hope nobody is starting to say, oh, now I'm not going to make any major release because then I have to do the second-hand assessment. I mean, that would be contradicting. So we need to make sure that this is benefiting for everybody. If not, then it's something wrong. But did that answer your question, Emil? Or?
Yep, partially. I would try to be more specific. So would you expect to release a CES 3.1 or 3.2? And if yes, then what would be the dynamics of the whole release? Would you do it quarterly or as soon as you have some things to change, or because also it might depend on our release schedules and so on. So we might need to schedule our work also. This is also an overhead, or it's an extra effort from the vendors to do these tests. So that's why I would like to know.
Yeah, as I said, the overall goal is to make it more efficient for you. So whatever we do is not, but at the same time, having the utility have confidence, in what you support. So, and I do not necessarily seeing that you need to have all these multiple versions supported, but of course, in a transition, and it is hard to say, but in general, we're also trying to not make changes to profile, even if we go up to a new version. So we will try to keep things a little bit more stable. It is difficult, but that's why we have the new 501, is at least have a way of explaining it in the profiles or the machine readable. But I think the overall goal is to give the confidence to the utility that you do have the support, and also not creating unnecessary overhead. Is that answer better?
Well, let's say if I understand correctly, you currently don't see when or if there will be a 3.1, for example, for the CAS, for the CAS particularly. So if there will be, you will probably announce it, and there will be some time to prepare for such a thing.
Yes, that's exactly
okay.
so.
Okay.
But again, we will try to then say that you don't need to redo the other one. So if you're not changing anything, you don't need to redo those in principle. But I mean, you can see the problems that you can do changes. So if you add new functionality, is the old one still working, type of thing. So I think the key thing is to do your self-assessment, and then being a little bit what makes sense for you to the assessment body. And I rather think it's better for you to schedule it in a way that it fits with your release, than have it kind of forced upon you. But we will try. I mean, the business process is also a question if they are starting to demand that you have to do these and these, and again, the reason we're doing it is so that the utility can then trust your application to say that, okay, now, for instance, for the CSA, okay, it has actually go through the second-hand performance, so yes, I believe it. But also by saying I have tested it against all the test model, it's also giving the utility some kind of trust or some kind of understanding. So I think it will be some time before we have it all kind of lined out. This is exactly the procedure. But right now we see that there hasn't been much assessment lately, and some of that is because the business process has been toggling what's the standard and what's the business process, and all of this we're trying to resolve in this consolidated 3.0 version, and is to build this type of assessment on top of it. So that could be that there will be some additional assessment to make sure that you support the 10 years network development planning and the CSA. But again, we're trying to do, if anything is preventing you from being efficient, we will like to change it so that we don't do it that way.
Okay, thank you.
And maybe just to try to complete, the reason actually to have a new version of a CASR going maybe to 3.1 or 4 will be either, let's say, changing of the underlying standard. So if you have a CGMS 3.1, adding, let's say, one additional profile or something like that, then of course the conformity should get maybe another 1 or 2 test use cases. And this then will require for vendors at least to show up for that additional part. Or I see this more as an additional functionality in case this is an additional profile. And certainly when we look at the SAT kind of testing, there might be over time adaptation of the business process, which could result out of additional test procedures or test use cases. So this then we need to see how it works, but it's really essential to have a good communication and release planning of these things. And what most probably will change more often will be the test data, because this we will always find issues there. And with every change, yeah, this should get better and better over time. But changing of test data shouldn't be necessarily a requirement for vendor to repeat the testing. So that.
Exactly. I mean, or force them. So it's self-assessment. So I hope everybody can download the latest one and report if we make an update that your self-assessment is done on the latest. And again, what we're trying is that when you then do the site acceptance test, it makes it easier for you to say, hey, their customer, your data is wrong, you know. You have to do so and so. So it makes it, you know, efficient in the way that we know what's wrong. That's a little bit the gold, you know. Or for the utility to clearly state, hey, now actually I downloaded the latest test models, run it through your systems, and hey, you don't get the same result, you know, you don't get the result out, which, you know, it helps us in the communication and improve performance, improve equality. So good question. And more questions? Are any other people having their hands up? Oh, looks like the people gonna be having 15 minutes back. We'll let people. Okay. So keep us informed how things are going, and let us know if there's anything wrong in the, you know, what we provided. So now you kind of have the timeline. So we will post when they're all available to download, and when we are opening the conformance for registration. And curious to see who's the first one. That will always be fun. So I'll thank you, everybody. Or Sim, maybe you want to say some last words?
Yeah, thank you, Svein, again. Thank you, Chavdar, for this good presentation. Thank you to everyone for joining us on this journey of webinars for all this topic. So I would like to thank you also for all the feedback that you have sent to us during this time and during these webinars that help us to progress in this topic. So I will submit to you these recordings, I will submit to you the presentation, and as Svein mentioned, we are available for your further comments and clarifications, and we will be in touch whenever is necessary to have more information for you. Thank you all of you again, and have a good day. So I will close the call now.